Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SEC Boys podcast. My name is Trevor, and I am joined by Levi.
What up?
And yeah, we're just hopping in. This is the first episode of season three. This is our third season. It's kind of hard to believe it's been going on for this long, but yeah, third season kind of covering SEC football as well as Tennessee football, uh, which is obviously our favorite team. We try to be as unbiased as possible, but of course, we're gonna have some biases of our own. But yeah, so obviously this last weekend was week one officially of the college football season. Um, so today we're just going to kind of talk about recap Tennessee and Chattanooga. Um, and yeah, so obviously 69 to 3 win against the Mocs. Huge win for the Vols and really put on an impressive show. And yeah, starting with basically Nico, yeah, having a huge game, really a huge difference from last season with Joe Milton. Nico, much more accurate quarterback. But yeah, I mean, Levi, do you have any takeaways from the first game of the season?
It just feels a lot different than last year watching Tennessee in these kind of games. Last year it just felt like kind of a struggle, like in that Austin P game, for example. It just didn't feel like you were playing a FCS team when we were playing it last year. But this year, like you could tell we were playing an FCS team because we were killing them. And so just that's honestly the biggest jump I can tell from this year to last year is we aren't playing down to our opponent and we're able to like it's definitely just the quarterback in general. The quarterback, you can tell it's a different quarterback. And of course, we got other pieces that are better now, but just the quarterback, the quarterback play is just so much better than it was last year, and even in these small games, we can already tell that.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, we're only going to get better from here, which is the awesome part, right? Game one, a lot of teams struggled against lesser opponents. We were able to take care of business, dominate from the get-go, 24 points in the first quarter. And Nico, all 314 yards of passing come in the first half, setting a program record, right? I mean, I was really impressed with the wide receiver group. Obviously, it's a very similar group to last year, right? All the
Yeah,
pieces we add is really Brazel and
it's a much deep.
Art.
It's similar, but it's deeper, which
I
is
agree.
great. It's
I
great
agree.
because last year we had some key injuries in that position group that really hurt us. Losing Brew kind of just it just made it much harder, and then we ended up losing Dante Thornton when he was starting to hit his stride at the end of the
Right.
season. And so having a big wide receiver room is going to be big because if we do end up having some random injuries of key receivers, we're going to have some backups who are maybe not as good as that player that got hurt, but they're going to be able to skip right in there, and it's going to be fine. Which I love
Yeah,
to
the
see
depth of
that.
the receiving group is awesome because we have several guys that could be the number one target, right? Each game, really. I mean, Dante Thornton led the team in receiving, 105 yards, two touchdowns on just three receptions. But and he's really coming along great. Last year he really struggled receiving the ball, right, catching the ball. Had a lot of drops. We had really high hopes for him last year. This year I think he could take more of a spotlight and more of that number one wide receiver role. And I think we don't really have a true number one wide receiver because I
Hmm.
think we're just that deep in that position group. And they really balled out. They showed out, and uh, we don't ask a whole lot of them, right? It's a lot of RPO reads, right? A lot of choice routes. They make the decision on where they're going on their route. But I think Nico being able to spread the ball around is going to have defenses guessing, and it's going to be hard to double team one of these guys because we got three others that can take over a game.
Yeah,
I truly believe that.
and then
And
you
then
can't forget
obviously,
about the tight ends too. We got some good tight ends in
yeah,
there.
of course, yeah. Ethan Davis, two catches, 20 yards. I think he started the game. He also had a touchdown.
He did.
And then because I thought Holden Stays, the transfer from Notre Dame, would start the game. But I'm pretty sure Ethan Davis did. Stays also had two catches for 13 yards. But I could see them having a bigger role this year than they did last year. We didn't really have a great receiving tight end.
Yeah,
Princeton Fant left 2 years ago, right? But I think one of those guys could be more of a Princeton Fant role, receiving tight end.
yeah.
It's
Ethan
just
Davis
another
is going to be
weapon, you
good.
know? Oh yeah, for sure.
He is the highest ceiling of the two. Holden Stays was just kind of the older transfer, but I think
Right.
Ethan Davis has definitely got a bit higher of a ceiling out of the two of them.
Yeah, I agree. And like Dylan Sampson also had a great game. 3 touchdowns, 124 yards, rushing on 12 carries. That huge 56-yard run. But I was also surprised and pleasantly surprised with the depth we have in the backfield.
Yeah.
Bishop, I thought, played great.
Well, I think they all looked good.
Uh-huh.
Cam Seldon's coming off of an injury, I think, so
Yeah.
he's not going to be as good to start off the season as maybe some people would hope. But having Deshaun Bishop come in there and he looked good, that makes me a little bit more confident that Cam Seldon's not going to be at 100% probably for the first little bit. But even too,
Right.
also Khalifa Keith and Peyton Luce didn't look horrible. They're definitely
Right.
not starter caliber, but they're going to be good backups that you can get in there at certain points in the game.
I
Definitely
think
in the
years
smaller
past,
schools too.
right. And I think in years past we kind of have a running back by committee type group, right?
Hmm.
Last year we didn't have a clear starter. This year is definitely the Sampson show, right? And I
Yeah.
think he's deserved and earned that role. He's definitely the best running back we have in the group. That's not to say that Bishop and Selden aren't going to get a lot of playing time because I think that they are. Because I don't think Sampson's the type of guy that's going to be able to run 30 times a game, and we're not going to ask him to do that necessarily. But
Hmm.
it is nice to have options. But he is definitely the clear
Well,
cut
that's
option
definitely a
right
position
now.
group that you're going to have options too. You can't only play one running back. You have to be able to slide another guy in there to take some hits, block, get some more reps because you can't just keep Dylan Sampson in the whole game or else he's going to get hurt before the end of the
Exactly.
season.
Yeah, I agree completely. And honestly, I was kind of going over to the defensive side of the football. I was pleasantly surprised there as well. I
Hmm.
think we really dominated the line of scrimmage, which is kind of what kept them, out of the end zone all game.
Tyree
Um,
West and Joshua
yep,
Josephs both looked very good.
very good. We didn't see a whole lot of
Pierce.
James Pierce, but he also had moments. The defensive line just took over. They could not run the football on us. They also couldn't block us in the passing game, and they had to settle for a lot of quick throws, which were sometimes there. But the
Yeah.
defense did all you could ask for in week one,
The
and we
DBs
played
didn't.
a lot of players. So
I will say one thing I'm curious to see next week. The DBs didn't really get tested too much. There weren't a lot of deep passes or anything. The few times they did okay with it. Like there were some
yeah,
broken up passes. But I'm curious next week to see how the DBs perform because I really don't think that this game is a good indicator to see how the secondary is gonna be against better competition. So we got to see them against a Power Five team before I can really say
I
how
agree.
good they are.
Yeah, they didn't have to get tested this week, especially because the pass rush was so good. But we also saw, I think the linebacker core also had a great game.
Yeah.
I feel like Peely didn't play a whole lot. I could be wrong on that. T-Lander was in the majority of the game. Arion Carter played good while he was in. We
Hmm.
just didn't need to go deep in our bag on defense, right? They played their starters the whole time. We were 3 or 4 deep on defense by the end of the game.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's just Chattanooga, not a whole lot defensively. I feel like offensively, there's more things to point at because you need your quarterback to be accurate in this offense. Doesn't matter who you're playing against, right? You need good decision making. That's always on the offensive side of the football. Defensively, we have better athletes. We're bigger, stronger,
Yeah.
faster. We were expect to shut them down, and there's not much to see because we just dominate their line of scrimmage, so they can't do
Yeah,
anything.
they didn't have any time to pass the ball 90% of the time. It was just they had to get rid of it quick, and that was just because the D line was just getting right to them, and that's a great sign going forward. Because I mean that D
Yeah.
line's gonna be good.
For sure. But do you have anything else to say about the Chattanooga game?
No, just it's an easy game. You can't really take too much from it, but it's definitely a good starting point for this team going forward for being a playoff
So
hopeful.
obviously, next week we have the Dukes Mayo Classic in Charlotte, North Carolina. Tennessee takes on NC State, who is also 1-0. That's going to be currently that's a 15th versus 24th ranked matchup. Tennessee favored by 6.5 as the line stands now. Over under at 58.5. Tennessee 88% chance to win. according to ESPN. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting game. I think it's a nice early test. This isn't an SEC caliber team by any means,
No.
and obviously struggled with Western Carolina last week. And I just want to touch on them real quick. I mean, I'm not sure if you watched much of the game. Um, I watched some of that game just because it was kind of intriguing. You know, obviously we're playing them this week, and they were losing the fourth quarter, 21-17, before
Yeah.
they ended up coming back and win at 38-21.
I watched a decent
Um,
amount of the game.
I just wasn't impressed. I know a lot of teams have been struggling with first-time quarterbacks, right? Transferred quarterbacks. Grayson McCall didn't look great. He had that interception early. Wasn't extremely accurate with the football. 26 of 40 for 318 yards, 3 touchdowns, and that interception. Um, I don't know. I feel like they didn't take over till late, till they kind of wore them out, right? The better team is going to win in that scenario. And they just have better athletes. But I
Yeah.
think their biggest concern was kind of the line of scrimmage. Weren't getting a lot of pressure, and also just weren't blocking Western Carolina that well.
Yeah, and
Um,
that alone just kind of makes me feel like this one's going Tennessee's way because usually games are won at the line of scrimmage a lot of
right,
times. And Tennessee, from everything I've seen from both of those two games, Tennessee easily has the better defensive line at least. Now, I don't know if I can't I didn't watch super closely on NC State's defensive line, but I don't think they did that great. So I really think Tennessee's going to win the line of scrimmage in this game very easily. And
right.
so I think really the biggest thing to be worried about for Tennessee in this game is just getting they just need to get if they get to the quarterback when he's about to pass, if they get to him before he and don't give him enough time to find receivers in open field, you're going to be fine. And I think we can
Right.
do that. I don't think NC State's O line is good enough to stop our D line. So I think it'll work out in Tennessee's favor, but who knows? That's why we played the games. If it was
You're looking
based
at
off of
9 tackles for loss for Western Carolina. They had 9 tackles for loss and a sack.
that's
Four
crazy.
four passes deflected. NC State only had 2 sacks and 4 tackles for loss. They got beat on the line of scrimmage by just that statistic alone, right? And then passing wise, Western Carolina was 22 of 35 for 211 yards.
Mhm.
Their starting quarterback, 2 touchdowns. That guy's an experienced starting quarterback. Has been playing there a while, but an FCS school, obviously, they're an outmatched opponent, like athletic from an athletic standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And
and obviously their
Chattanooga's a
secondary, NC
comparable
State's,
team to Western
they are very
Carolina.
comparable. They play in the same conference. Both teams are ranked in the FCS respectively. Um, I don't know. You definitely you got to be concerned about NC State's secondary, as in I don't know how well they're going to be able to stop our passing attack. And also, like I said, Grayson McCall just didn't look good early. I think he got right better towards the end, but not a lot of their threat, like not a lot of their wide receivers are gonna scare us. Other than Kevin Conception, 9 receptions, 121 yards, 3 touchdowns. He was their offense, right?
Yeah.
Um, Obviously their running back ran. Uh, he had 20 carries, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's the strength of our defense, right? If they're gonna try to
Yeah.
run it on us, they're not
Well,
gonna win the game.
we're gonna stop it.
They have to beat us in the air, and I'm just not sure if they have anyone else that can beat us besides Kevin Conception. Um, of course, their tight end Justin Jolie, 5 receptions, 75 yards. He's also a threat. I mean, look at the. I
But
mean, if you
Tennessee's
look at the
already
rest of
faced him
this
before
year,
last year.
that's right.
They,
He was on UConn last year.
yeah,
Just look at the rest. I think Noah Rogers. I'm pretty sure he's a tight end. 3 receptions, 43 yards. Your other receivers besides Conception combined for a total of, you know,
and
I mean,
I wasn't paying
very
attention
limited
to
yards
this,
and receptions.
but I saw somewhere or somebody, I don't know where I was listening to it, but they mentioned that North Carolina State actually did have some open receivers a lot during that game. I could be wrong, and because I didn't check this, but that kind of just tells me more. Maybe the receivers aren't horrible. It's maybe Grayson McCall
Right.
isn't
Yeah.
finding the open man, which that would be very good for Tennessee because Tennessee
It's
leaves
going to be
receivers
even more of
open
a
all the time.
problem. Right. And it's going to be even more of a problem whenever he's getting more pressure what he received against Western Carolina because our
Yeah.
defensive line will get home. Um, and I mean, yeah, it's just it was they did not look good at all. I mean, they
No.
just really didn't look good. I feel like once you get to the late point in the game, you
That
make
game was
that
a
push.
lot closer
Yeah,
than what the final score
it
indicates
was
too.
like you once you wear down a lesser opponent, you're gonna end up being able to get through, um, and finish the game off right
Yeah.
with 21 points in the fourth quarter alone. But yeah, I mean, it's just I wasn't really worried heading into this game, right? But I'm even less worried now. Pitiful performance, especially how we performed as well. Um, I don't think that we lose this game.
I don't
I
either.
really don't. I think we win by multiple scores, multiple touchdowns. I
I
could
was
see
kind of in the same.
a 17 to 21 point game or 17 to 21 point win ish, somewhere around there. I don't think it's going to be close.
I would say I was in the same boat as you, where I kind of thought NC State was a little bit overrated. Like, yeah, they'll probably be decent, but then after watching that game, it just I don't know. You can't take too much stock in these games
It's
against
just
smaller
week one,
school, but
right?
it
Yeah.
just does it to me. It comes off like they're kind of similar, probably similar to what we were last year, maybe, where they're good enough to win a decent amount of games, but they're not gonna beat a number 15 team or a top 10 team. They're just not. They're gonna beat all the teams they should, and that's about it, probably.
And they could drastically improve throughout the season. I just don't see a huge improvement from week one to week two.
Yeah,
Of course, there's a chance we get their best shot. I mean, we probably will. Um, but Grayson McCall is just going to have to be a whole lot better. I think the statistics don't really reflect. He was missing receivers a lot, especially in that first half. And like against a good opponent, we're going to be able to take advantage of that. And even if he plays better in the second half, run him out of the building at that point
I think
because
they'll
there's
need to.
just not enough. There's you need to start fast against
Yeah,
us because we're gonna hit you in the mouth basically. So
I also think they're gonna need to force some turnovers too in there.
yeah,
They're gonna have to be. They're gonna have be positive turnovers and not turn the ball over to win this game. And I think Tennessee. That's one thing. Tennessee's defense isn't very good at coverage a lot of times, but the special teams is also good at this. They're good at getting some random turnovers or special teams plays where they get points off of it. NC State's going to have to minimize that while also maybe getting a fumble or a interception in there somewhere
yeah,
in order to
they're
win
gonna
this
be
game.
very opportunistic and play very clean.
Yeah.
Um, and this could go wrong for Tennessee. I just don't see it going wrong. I think if we play, I mean, if we just play to our within ourselves, right? I mean, Nico has shown him that he is, calm, cool, and collected at all
Hmm.
times. And he's very accurate with the football. Even if we play a minimum playbook like we have played against Chattanooga, where we didn't really open up or show anything,
Yeah.
um, I don't think we're gonna have to show a whole lot in this game either. To be honest, I think we're good enough to
Yeah.
win that game without reaching deep in the bag. And like speaking of that, like NC State, I'm pretty sure they had a double reverse pass, at some point, or
Hmm.
double reverse run or something. But what I'm trying to say is they had to reach in the bag here, right, late
Yeah.
in that game. Um, to
Tennessee
kind of, I
did
mean,
not.
you're losing in the fourth quarter. Like, I mean, you have to show more than you are willing to show, and they played their starters the entire game, right, compared to
Yeah, and
us only
that's
our
another
stuff.
thing too that's going to help Tennessee. Tennessee didn't have to play their starters the whole game. Tennessee's
Yeah,
only basically their starters played half a game, while NC State played a full game where it was close all the way up until about like halfway or a quarter of the way through the fourth quarter.
right.
So I mean, it's just the odds are stacked against NC State, and I think just if you get the same Tennessee that was playing last week and the same NC State that was playing last week, if both those teams play about that like that, it's gonna go the same way. NC State's gonna probably play better. Tennessee's definitely not gonna score 69 points on NC State, but I don't see NC State playing that much better enough to beat Tennessee
I just don't.
personally.
I mean, I see us scoring in the 30s or 40s. I
Oh,
don't
I
think our
think
defense is good
40s.
enough.
I
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
think our
we
defense
easily
is good
score in
enough
the
to stop
40s
us.
against them, at
Yeah,
least. I think
yeah.
maybe they score like 20 maybe 20 something, and we score 40 or 50 something.
With
That's
just how Western Carolina played, I mean, especially in the passing game, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do even better than that.
yeah. And we'll
Because
see. It could go. We could
it
blow
could.
them out. It could be a close game. I just don't see us losing. But I could see either of those two, us blowing them out or it being a really close game where Tennessee pulls it out. I could see both of those happening. There's no way NC State's gonna blow out Tennessee. I don't really see that
Yeah, I don't see a
happening.
reason. Especially with if we have a fast start, it's over. I think. I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
if they're going to be able to catch up. Obviously, a huge, very fast start against Chattanooga, 24 points in the first quarter, and it was over.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, yeah. Like I said, first week can't take can't bank everything on the first week, right? But there are some concerns for NC State, and there weren't any for Tennessee. And I think before these games were played, the first week Tennessee was the better team. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to give score predictions, I'll go first. I think Tennessee wins 42-24. Um, yeah, for all the reasons we kind of been discussing. Um, I think our secondary is still concerns. I wouldn't be surprised even if Grayson McCall doesn't have the best game. I think that Kevin Conception and their tight ends could, be pose a problem for a real threat for us, right? But I don't
Hmm.
think they're gonna be able to run the ball. I think they get maybe some scores late. So yeah, 42-24 Tennessee
I
walks
could.
away with the victory. We don't really sweat the whole time.
I would say something kind of similar. Maybe somewhere around 27. I don't know, 50. I'm trying to think of what a logical score would be. 50 something, maybe like 50, 52. I don't know. Would that be a logical score?
Yeah, 52.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a
27, 52, something like that. I think Tennessee scores a decent amount personally. But we of course I don't know. I think our defense is definitely improved, but I feel like we'll definitely let them score. They'll probably get some points close to the end maybe if we're up by a lot to make it a little closer. So 27-52 is what I'd say.
All right, and with that we can kind of move on here. So the very end of the show here, we're just going to try to talk about some SEC football. Obviously, there's a game tonight as of this recording, Sunday night. We have LSU and USC. It's I think it's 7. But
7:30.
yeah, a lot of teams took care of business. Um, Murray State, Missouri, is 51-0. I'm not really going to go over a lot of the scores here. Basically, there's a couple games we want to talk about here. Georgia kind of did its thing. We don't really have to spend a lot of time on that. Basically, I
Yeah.
mean,
Bad first I
I
mean
barely
slow
watched
first
any of that
half,
game.
dominated second
Super
half.
slow first half. If Clemson has a better offense, it's a different game. Because I don't think if anyone starts off to a fast start against Georgia, and that when they score 6 points in the first half, it's a completely different game in the second half, right?
Yeah. A
Yeah,
team
there's not
like
much to say. Georgia looks good again. I mean,
yeah,
that's about it.
Georgia can't do that against a better team later on in the season. I don't
Yeah,
think
like
they
an
I think
Alabama,
they'll
Tennessee.
I
Yeah,
think they'll be better by then to where they won't start that
yeah.
slow if another team starts fast. But it's definitely a little bit of something to be worried about if you're a Georgia fan, but not too worried about because Clemson is still probably one of the better ACC teams, and you still beat them 34-3.
Just, I mean, one thing of note here, Carson Beck had a good game, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns. Georgia didn't have either of its starting. Uh, the, Out of the two starting running backs that they had, they didn't have either one. So they were on their third string running back. He still had 83 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah,
Just something of note, they didn't have the running backs, and they still dominated in the second half against a really really good Clemson defense and a really, really terrible Clemson offense. Texas took care of business. Alabama took care of business. Ole Miss did the same. Texas A&M, Notre Dame. That's kind of something we wanted to talk about, right?
yeah.
I don't know. Did you watch? Did you watch that game?
I watched like the key plays on YouTube TV, so I didn't like sit down and watch the
Awesome.
whole game, but I saw key plays, and it was very
I think
very close all the way up until the end of it, where Notre
it
Dame kind of
really
pulled
was.
away.
I feel like A&M couldn't take any advantage of their opportunities that they had given, especially in the first half.
Hmm.
Um, and just I think Notre Dame just has a better quarterback, and that's kind of why they won.
Yeah, it was just the better
um,
team pulled it out in the end,
they
and
were, yeah, they were
A&M
definitely the better team.
A&M was probably very much helped by the home field advantage. That being
For sure.
said, though, A&M has a very good defense. If they get their offense a little better, they could be a decent team for their with a first year coach. I think.
Right.
Which, to be fair, they should be a good team. They still have a very good roster.
They
So it's
retained a lot of that roster,
yeah.
from
So it's
last
not
year.
like this is a bad roster. It's just it's a first year head coach. The defense was good last year too. So it's just they just got to get that offense going, and I think they'll be good or bet well, they'll be decent at least going into the rest of the
Yeah, I
season.
just don't think that they have the quarterback to do it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true too.
uh, and they just don't really have weapons on the outside. I don't think they like their wide receivers are just not great. I think you just need a better quarterback too. And I think they probably should have got one. I mean,
12 of
Wake
30 is kind of crazy.
12 for 30 for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns.
That's pretty bad.
That's not good.
To be fair, though, the
That's
Notre
really
Dame
and the difference.
quarterback went 18 of 30.
He didn't pass very well either, but here's the big difference, right? Is he's able to extend plays with his legs. Like that's
Yeah,
his thing, right? Riley Leonard, that's what he did at Duke too. It's like third downs, his ability to evade sacks, extend drives is some of the tops in the country as far as like running quarterbacks go.
yeah.
Um, and they just were not able to stop him in those situations like Texas A&M wasn't, and that's kind of the difference in the game, right?
And
And
20
also just
carries
in
for
they
70 yards is not very good either with their
yeah,
top.
that's not great either.
Yeah, just a pitiful
Uh,
offensive performance all around.
It's actually honestly so surprising it was this close, right? I mean, it was a slow moving game. Both defenses were really good though. Like Notre Dame's defense is very solid.
Hmm.
Um, it's just like, man, you got it. A&M has a different quarterback, and you're talking about a different situation. They potentially win that game.
Yeah,
But I do think their receivers are just not where they should be. I wouldn't be surprised if this is like a 7 or 8 win team.
yeah.
Um,
I think
but
that's where I'd probably put them 7 or 8 wins, maybe
yeah,
6 if they have something not go their way.
yeah.
But
Yeah, so Tennessee took care of business as well. But yeah, we can talk about this Florida game.
oof,
I've been really excited to get to this one. Obviously, not huge Florida fans here. Man, there's so many things to talk about in this game. Uh, but they got curb stomped at home. I think that's one of the biggest stories is like they don't get many of these big games at home this year. And they've
nope.
got a rough schedule, right? Man, they could not take advantage of this opportunity. Opening game, like I was saying, a lot of these transfer quarterbacks have struggled in their opening game so far. Not Cam Ward.
Yeah.
Not Cam Ward at all.
And to be fair to Florida, Miami, most people, including myself, would probably say Miami's the favorite right now to win the ACC. So they are
Oh
probably
yeah,
playing the
easily.
best or probably first or second best ACC team at least. So I
Yeah.
mean, that's fair.
But
To
this
be fair
isn't
though, the ACC's
this
not SEC caliber
so
too.
this team is equivalent to, the top half of the SEC teams. Like the top 6 or 7 SEC teams are probably just as good as Miami is,
Yeah,
right? Very
if
comparable.
not better.
So this is yeah, and so this is like this is the competition they're gonna face all year. Like,
Yeah, because they're playing Georgia, us, uh,
yeah,
Florida State's not as good as people were thinking, but still, they've got a tough schedule.
they have a very tough schedule. Um, Cam Ward though, like besides the one interception, very clean game. He's one of the better quarterbacks they're gonna face all year.
Mm-hmm.
26 of 35, 385 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Also ran for 33 yards, including a 24-yard scamper. That was big, because obviously mobile quarterback. Um, but yeah, I don't know. So I think I really do want to talk about Florida because Miami, this being the first game of the season, like they played just as about as good as anyone in the country did in the first game of the season, I'd say,
Yeah,
and against a pretty tough opponent, right?
at at that place too.
At,
They
yeah,
were
in
playing
the
away.
swamp, which is one of the hardest places to play, right? And
Yeah.
this game was kind of like it started out slow, right? The crowd was super into it. 7-3 at the end of the first quarter. Miami takes over in the second quarter, and then they're off to the races there. But I kind of want to talk about the Florida side of this because we're, SEC podcast.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of stuff concerning. I know this is a very good Miami team, including a very good Miami defensive line. But man, they're off. They got pushed around on both sides of the ball. Their defensive line, um, not great. The interior of their defensive line is pretty good. Their ends are just not great. And there was so many busted coverages in the secondary. A lot of these passes Cam Ward had were busted coverage, wide open players, right? I mean, they're gonna have to clean up their secondary because they're gonna be facing a lot of good passing teams in the coming weeks. Um, and I mean, did you have anything to say on their defensive side of the ball that you saw?
They just they just don't look. I think they don't look as last because last year their defense I think was probably the stronger
Yeah,
part of their team, and their defense looks worse than it did last year in
yeah,
my opinion.
I agree.
That's not good because they're playing at
Considering their
way
offense looked worse seeded as well.
yeah. So it's just they're just an all around worse team. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say they're the worst team in the SEC right now. I'd definitely probably say South Carolina is, but they're not super far behind. I mean, thankfully they don't play
Yep.
Vanderbilt because they might would get embarrassed by Vanderbilt this season. Well, not thankfully, but like thankfully, if you were a Florida fan, that's you be thankful you're not playing Vanderbilt because that maybe that would be an easier game than a lot of your other games, but that would be embarrassing to lose that game. And I honestly, right now, if I was picking that game, I would pick Vanderbilt to beat Florida personally.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're the worst team in the SEC, especially from a talent standpoint. They have a talented roster,
Yeah.
right? Um, and even it's hard to say, right? It's just a week one sample size, but
Mhm.
also like we know that their schedule is really tough. So like, are we going to get a chance to be like, when do we stop making excuses and being like, okay, it was just against this team, it was just against this team, like when is it going to be who they are? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and
So
they really don't have any easy SEC opponents this season.
no,
I would say the easiest one on their schedule, if I'm remembering correctly, I think is Mississippi State.
right?
Maybe they might play Auburn. I can't remember. Those two are the easiest ones on their schedule, and I think the rest of the SEC teams they're playing are ranked.
Yeah,
So this is
yeah. I
just
mean,
not a good sign for them.
I don't know. I think Graham Mertz like took a step back. I don't think that offensive line is very good, and obviously Miami has a really good defensive line, including Tyler Barron from Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
um, that transferred from Tennessee. But Mertz also got hurt at the end of that game, and we're not exactly sure what happened there. But if he's out for any length of time, they have a freshman
Yeah.
who would be there to replace him, which is just not great either. But that
Who knows? He
offensive line
could
should
be
be really
better
quick.
than Mertz, though.
Like he could be better than Mertz. I think the mobility with DJ Lagway kind of helps with a worse offensive line, right?
Yeah. They both
But
put
man, I
up
mean,
similar
throwing the football,
stats.
they just don't have any weapons either. That's all I've been saying. Like Eugene Wilson the third, that's their best receiver, and he's more of a screen, get him in space type of guy. He's not a deep threat, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just don't have a lot of guys that can catch passes down the field, and they don't have a lot of time to throw those passes down the field either.
No,
Um,
that's never really been Billy Napier's style of play. I think his style of play, because this is what he did with Tennessee, is kind of just try and slow things down. They want to play a slow game where they get the lead, and then they just slowly wither down their opponent to where they win. He's not going to be able to do that with this roster. They're just not good enough. Last
Especially with
year
that
they were
defense. Yeah.
Last year they were able to catch some teams like Tennessee at home, and there was maybe one I can't remember who all they beat last year. They were able to get some wins by doing that, but it's just not going to work for them. That's just not the SEC is just too fast paced now for them for that style of play to work on other SEC teams in my opinion, unless you're just that good at the line of scrimmage, which they're not. So
Yeah, and their philosophy is kind of to get like athletes in space, right? But their run game wasn't even like So Montreal Johnson, right? They're starting running back, 11 carries, 106 yards and a touchdown. He
Hmm.
had that 71-yard run. So you take away that run,
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
that's not great. But they didn't run him a whole lot. Like they just didn't have a lot of plays on offense. They were pretty dominated
So that's basically
in
10
time of
carries for
possession.
35 yards. About.
Right.
That's pretty
That's not
bad.
great. Yeah, it's just not great. So I don't know. We'll have to see how they fare. I think they got a couple of easy games coming up, and then they play Tennessee a little bit
Yeah, they
later on
play.
in
I think they
the
play
week.
Samford next. Yeah,
So they
that
got
A and M
Sanford next.
that A&M game is gonna be a good game. I think.
That's
But
going to be interesting.
is it
That's
at
going to be an
home?
interesting
Yeah, it's
game
at home.
because they
That
could be pretty similar teams.
I
At
actually
home.
think Florida
Yeah,
could maybe catch A&M because it's in the
they
swamp.
could.
If
Yeah.
it was at A&M, I would pick A&M. But since it's at the
Right.
swamp, I don't know how I feel about that one. Mississippi State game.
And they got Mississippi State
We
and
really don't know how
UCF.
good Mississippi State is.
Besides that Sanford game, it's not a cakewalk until they get to Tennessee, and then that back half of the schedule is when it gets brutal. You got Tennessee,
Yeah.
Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss first.
Yeah, really, this next game stretch is they have to win like two or
They
three of these
have to
games.
win.
They honestly probably have to beat
They
A
have
and
to win
M.
all these games to get to a bowl game. They got to win all these
Yeah, they
games
have to beat A
within the
and M,
next.
Samford, and Mississippi State.
Yeah,
I mean, the
but yeah, just
Samford
week
game you
one
have to win.
wasn't impressed though.
No,
Oh yeah, sure. Wasn't impressed with Florida, just week one, but there's a ton of stuff that's concerning. But I do think Miami's really good. But I do think Florida is pretty bad.
yeah,
Um, yeah, we can quickly here talk about a
Vanderbilt.
couple more games. Vanderbilt with the surprise, 34-27 against Virginia Tech at home in overtime. Dude, Diego Pavia, their quarterback they got from New Mexico State is legit.
Yeah,
Uh,
he didn't put up as crazy numbers
this guy's gonna win
as
them some games.
he.
Leading rusher and
Yeah,
109 yards passing. Great
he put
touchdown.
up good rushing yards. His passing, from what I'm seeing from the stats, isn't necessarily crazy. It's decent, but like those rushing yards,
Right.
it's pretty good. But I don't know.
They didn't ask him to do a whole lot. I think he's more of like an option guy, right? They didn't really ask him to do a whole lot,
Yeah,
but the way he was able to create plays with his legs, just watching some of that, I watched some of that game,
it's
especially
crazy.
the last half of it because it was really close.
If
But
you would have told me, because I saw that I didn't watch the whole game, but if you would have told me, because Vanderbilt was winning for the most of the first half, and then I heard they let Virginia to come back, and then they came back and won in overtime. If you would have told me that Vanderbilt let Virginia take the lead again, I would have told, oh, Vanderbilt's gonna lose that. So them pulling that out in overtime is pretty crazy in and of itself. Other than them just winning that game is crazy too. Like nobody would have expected that if you told them a year ago Vanderbilt would beat a Power Five non-conference team.
yeah, and I was kind of especially impressed with the defense. I mean, the stats don't necessarily reflect it, but especially in that first half, they really dominated Virginia Tech. And
Hmm.
this is supposed to be a Virginia Tech team that's under the radar, right? Kind of a low key team that was supposed to be pretty good this season, 9 or 10 wins.
Yeah,
But man, I'm very impressed. I feel like they got more athletes on offense too, which is something that they never ever have, or at least in the recent seasons, right?
yeah.
Is players that can actually make plays, and I think it starts at the running back position with them.
They're definitely
Or I mean, at the quarterback position with them.
they're definitely a scarier team than Vanderbilt teams have passed. I think they still probably won't make a bowl game. They'll get close. I think they'll win 5 games, but they're definitely a scarier team that you can't overlook this season. You're gonna have to treat them like other teams if you want to get through it easily. You could probably still maybe overlook them if you're a top tier SEC team and get by, but you don't want to do that. You want to respect them. They're a respectable team this season, I think, comparatively to what they've been in the past.
Yeah, still pretty happy for them.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. I'm excited to see what they do the rest of the season.
Speaking of impressive, but the opposite of it, South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Oof.
I watched almost none of this game, um, but I did watch the last little bit.
I watched a little bit. I wasn't paying
Uh,
super close attention, but I put it on for a little bit. South Carolina,
basically, their quarterback is really bad.
yeah, they're basically the exact same team as last year, but a little worse. For being honest, they just have a worse
Yeah,
quarterback.
offensive line is also really bad too.
They
Yeah.
they have a worse quarterback, which is not a good sign. Because the only reason they were in some games last year was because of their quarterback. So
Yeah, I think that's a huge difference, right? It's just the lack of quarterback play compared to last season.
funny thing too is I
Um,
saw I saw a clip of Shane Beamer after the game. He was getting interviewed. He looked like he wanted to die after that. Like so they were on him. He's like smiling for the camera. He turns. His face immediately goes to like the most depressed look as he's turning away before and the camera's still on him. That team is not in a good spot. It's gonna get worse for South
I
Carolina.
It will. They won't win a lot of games this year. They might win two or three more, but
Right now
at the
they're the
same
worst team in the
time,
SEC in my
oh,
opinion.
easily the worst team in the SEC for sure. And the thing is though, I don't even know if they fire Beamer. To be honest, I don't think that they will.
That's so funny.
Um, but I really don't see them firing him.
I mean,
He's the best.
who are they gonna hire?
I know that's what I'm saying. I don't. He's the best they're gonna get for now. But they're just not a good program this year. Especially, I mean, so Old Dominion was winning 19-16. I forget I think they fumble on their own 20, and South Carolina scores the game-winning touchdown with like a minute left.
Yeah.
So they were going to lose the game, right? And actually, looking at the stats here, Old Dominion's quarterback throws 2 interceptions, and they also fumble the ball twice. So 4 turnovers for Old Dominion, still winning by 3 points with 4 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Like, they hold on to the ball, they win the game, right? They get like 3 or 4 first downs and it's over. South Carolina plays anyone better, they don't win that game.
Nope.
Just a quick look at their schedule.
They're gonna have to improve a lot if they want to win more than just the Akrons
They
and the
might beat
Woffords.
Akron.
Akron and Wofford are the only two teams left on their schedule that I would
uh,
favor them in.
they could get a random upset. You never know, but it's looking like a 3-win season for
Any upset they're gonna get's gonna have to be at home too. So I don't know. I'm pulling for them against Missouri. I'll say that. But they're not beating Missouri.
No,
They're not gonna beat A&M. I think A&M was on their
no,
schedule, right? I'd assume so.
no, it wasn't.
It wasn't?
It was LSU. They had a
Well,
they basically
they're not beating LSU.
LSU, Ole
No,
Miss,
A&M's on
Bama,
their schedule.
Oklahoma, oh, A&M.
Yeah. So they're gonna lose all those games, and
They're
they'll lose to
they're not,
Clemson.
they're not going to. Yeah, that's we'll say that. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I just want to we just want to laugh at South Carolina a
Yeah.
little bit. But did you have anything else that you wanted to go over?
Not really. Just want to say that South Carolina sold their soul for 2 wins in 2022, and they've been so bad ever since. They beat Clemson and beat Tennessee, acted like now they're gonna win a national championship, and have now, in my opinion, hit probably a low point, which is crazy that they're hitting a low point now when it feels like they've hit like 3 low points in the last like 5, 6, 7 years. So it's just crazy that honestly, it feels like they're at rock bottom right now. And they just 2 years ago they were acting like they were about to win a national championship in the next few years. So I just think that's funny, personally.
Yeah, no,
But
I mean it would in the state that the SEC is in right now. It's going to be really tough for any of these lower caliber teams to get better than a 4-win season,
yeah,
just because of how brutal. Like there's like 6 or so ranked SEC teams, right?
hmm
And there's a good chance you're going to be playing all 6 of them in a season, just because of how the schedule shapes up, right? We got way too many, basically just way too many teams in the SEC. I think there's
yeah.
16 or something like that. It's just gonna be really hard for these bottom half schools to make a bowl game, even because they don't play. They play a bunch of ranked schools and then they play each other. So like,
Yeah.
and
They
then those are
like they
games they could still lose. Like
a
they're
lot
gonna
of
lose
them
against the best teams, right? And then they could lose against each other. So it's
a,
just
a lot of them would be good ACC teams or Big 12 teams, but they're not. They're in the SEC, so there's not really much room to win the conference or get to the playoff because they're probably not going to be good enough to get there.
Yeah,
The only
I
way to
agree.
do it is by they're going to have to really, all these smaller schools are really going to have to get their NIL up in order to even entice people. But it's just you're competing against teams like Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and LSU, and all these top schools that just have so many fans and so many donors who are sending in big money. It's hard to compete with.
Yeah, for sure. There's not as much talent to go around because all those schools are the bigger schools are just gonna grab them. But yeah,
Yeah,
just watching week one, kind of in conclusion, I think the SEC is the best conference right now. I think pretty easily.
they've definitely improved since
Just week
last
one,
year.
definitely an overreaction, but it could be an overreaction. But I think they're definitely the best conference in the country right now,
No, and I think that the SEC took a step back last season,
for sure.
but this year I just feel like it's back to business, especially with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas, two solid teams.
Right,
It's just going to be back to being the dominant conference. But
for sure. But yeah, so with that, I think we can wrap up here. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Um,
give us
and
a
also like
like,
the video, please.
comment,
Yep. Comment,
comment
share,
who
do
you
all that
think
good
is going to win. Give us some predictions for next week's games.
I
Just
like that.
pick some games. Give us some predictions. Whatever games you want to pick.
I like that. Yeah, pick Tennessee to beat NC State. I don't think
Yeah.
that's gonna happen. Hopefully.
Everything else doesn't matter.
But yeah, with that we can kind of conclude there. Thank you all for tuning in, and yeah, it's been another episode of the SEC Boys,
See you
and that
next week.
concludes episode one. See y'all next week.